There's plenty of space up in the front, and we're going to be seeing a lot of wonderful pictures. So if you're having trouble seeing the screen, please feel free to move up a little bit, because that'll be one of the really cool things about this morning's presentation. Well, it's so good to see you out here this morning, and welcome to the King Institute for Faith and Culture. Today is the birthday of Claude Monet, who was born in Paris. Whoa, don't want to knock the computer down. Who was born in Paris in 1840. He and his friend Auguste Renoir were among the first European painters to take their canvases outside to paint, exploring directly from nature. Monet spent the rest of his career exploring the idea that you can never really see the same thing twice. In the last 30 years of his life, he painted almost nothing but water lilies in his garden at Giverny. Monet bought the 4-acre property in 1883, built the bridges, dug the lake, and selected all the flowers and plants himself. His gardens are now the property of the French Academy of Fine Arts, which hosts visitors from all over the world. So I hope someday maybe you can make it to Paris. And speaking of gardens, we're going to learn about an ancient and extraordinary one today, as well as many other fascinating things. The King Institute for Faith and Culture is delighted to co-sponsor today's lectures from our special international guests. And I want to give a special shout out to Dr. Don Hudson of the Department of Philosophy and Religion for making this happen, and also to our assistant Michelle Fagan, who has worked tirelessly to bring all of these pieces together. Yuval Godat comes to us from Tel Aviv University in Israel. He is senior lecturer in the Department of Archaeology and Ancient Near Eastern Cultures, and directs the university's excavations at the City of David, and co-directs the Azekah expedition. Oded Lipschitz is professor of Jewish history in the biblical period at Tel Aviv University, and serves as the director of Sonia and Marco Nadler Institute of Archaeology. Professor Lipschitz has been the director of the Ramat Rachel Archaeological Project since 2004, and since 2010 he has been the director of the Azekah expedition. And I can tell you that these gentlemen are exemplars in their field, tireless in their good work, and eloquent in their speech. Please give them a warm welcome from King University.
Well, hi everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here, and really thank you for the warm welcome. And thanks again, Don, for arranging it. I want to tell you in the coming few minutes to show you some cases of how archaeology, which is an exciting thing, can be even more exciting when we can combine it with the Bible, with the ancient Near East, when we can give our finds a context. In many cases, it involves not only digging and looking on the finds, but research, and research that is coming from different fields. And in this case, you will see some examples how we can combine our finds, not only with the Bible, but also with all kinds of ancient texts and all kinds of different methods of sciences in archaeology. And I hope that you'll understand how archaeology can become even more exciting when you can understand the bigger picture of the finds. So, I talked about it a little bit yesterday, but I can tell you that for many years, Yuval and Manfred and me, we excavated in a wonderful site very close to Jerusalem with a modern name, Ramat Rachel. It was called after Rachel's tomb, which is very close by, and this is the best place to see Rachel's tomb, which is in the entrance to Bethlehem. We found there a luxurious building, something that really you cannot find in many other places in Judah. This is the most unique structure that we found ever inside the kingdom of Judah, even more than the palace of the kings in Jerusalem. And we understood it as is because of it was, in our understanding, the place that the empires who ruled in Judah, the Assyrian Empire, the Babylonian Empire, the Persian Empire, who ruled in Judah for many years, this was the place that they built as their administrative center, as the place that the Judeans should bring the taxes to. So the building was excavated, and we found many luxurious things, but we found out that around this building, there was a garden. Now, a garden is something in the ancient Near East. The Assyrians had garden, the Babylonians had garden, the Hanging Garden in Babylon. The Persians had gardens, and the gardens were important because it symbolized how these empires are not ruling only the people, but ruling the nature, ruling the world. In this garden, they used to bring many plants from all over the world. In this garden, they, in some cases, used to bring animals, very strange animals from all over the world. And it was a luxurious garden in the Assyrian, Babylonian, Persian culture. Now, it was not only a garden to see, but it was also a garden to walk with all senses. The Babylonian, the Persian, the Assyrian gardens, they were gardens that you should listen to the waterfall, you should touch the fruits, you should smell the flowers. It should be something very unique. You should understand that, and this is also something that makes us very excited, that in ancient languages, in the ancient Semitic languages, garden, the meaning in garden is gan, and the meaning is to guard something that should be guarded, because in the ancient world, you couldn't have such a luxurious garden without a wall around it, without someone who is protecting it, because most of the other areas around are nearly desert. So even the word garden, to guard, in modern languages, something coming from the ancient languages. In the Bible, the most famous garden is the Garden of Eden. And if you think about the story in Genesis, it's also a garden surrounding with wall, and there is a master of the garden who can decide who will be in it and who will be outside of it. And when the Persians understood this, so they gave it also a name in the ancient Persian language, and they gave it a name Pardes. And Pardes in Persian language, in the ancient Persian language, is very similar to Gan in Hebrew, or the ancient Semitic languages, and means something that is guarded by wall. And when the Greeks conquered the area and wanted also to translate the Bible into Greek, and they saw the story in Genesis about the Garden of Eden, so they gave a name to this garden. They called this Paradise, because of the Persian Pardes for the garden. So the paradise of today, which is heaven, is coming for the Pardes of the Persians, for the Gan of the Assyrian, Babylonian, and the Israel. And the only people who excavate garden, who excavate paradise, is us in Ramat Rachel. So it was really exciting when we discovered that near this palace, with many, many nice items, like huge portfolio capitals in the doors, and the nice walls, and many, many luxurious items, like these pyramid stones that were on the top of the roofs, and these window balustrades. This is an example for the huge portfolio capital. It's huge, it's big. It's something like 400 kilos. It's very big. And these window balustrades that used to be in the windows, and we know that in ancient times we had windows like this, ivory of a window, but see the window itself, the only place that we actually can find windows like this is in this building in Ramat Rachel. And you can see many ivory items with this window and a head of a woman looking through the window. And again, the only place that we actually have a window like this is Ramat Rachel. So it was a real luxurious building with all these items. You can see these items inside the building. You can see these items outside the building. You can see each one of these items that I'm talking about on the roofs, in the windows, on the entrances. So it was a really unique place. It was a really unique structure symbolizing the Assyrian, Babylonian, Persian power inside the kingdom of Judah. In the garden, we know that the gardens were so unique that the people who built this structure, they took a natural hill and they changed the shape of the hill in order to create this structure and to build this garden. They just excavated all the western part of the hill, creating a platform, a very flat platform, like something like 16 tennis courts, flat. And they took all the material that they cut in the one side and they put it in the other side in order to have a flat area for the palace itself. So they cut here and they built there. You can see some of the cuts that we found in the excavation itself. So this is something that you can see over there. And the idea was to create in the middle of the desert, on one of the most prominent hills near Jerusalem, a structure that was looking from everywhere. It was like a cube. It was green with garden around it. It was very prominent in the view because of this palace that was up there. And this was the garden that we started to excavate in Ramat Rachel. Now, we saw that everywhere that we had, they had this flat rock, and above it they put something like 50 centimeters of chocolate-like soil that they brought especially from the around in order to create this garden. Everywhere that we excavated, we could see this flat bedrock, the 50 centimeters of soil, everywhere, and this was the base for the garden. So we had this palace, and we had around it the garden, and in the garden we have many water pools that they built, huge water pools. You can see here one of the water pools that we excavated. This is another corner of one of the water pools that we had. And this is amazing thing because we know exactly gardens and pools and system like this in the famous Assyrian palaces, Babylonian palaces, Persian palaces. This, for example, a palace in Assyria, a kind of a symbol of a palace, and you can see the same thing that we found in Ramat Rachel in this garden. You can see these capitals on the head of columns or entrances. You can see this pyramid-shaped stones on the roofs. Everything that we have in Ramat Rachel, we could see that we also have in these gardens and in these palaces in the Assyrian Empire. Again, this is the garden and the palace of the king Sargon II. This is the king that destroyed the kingdom of Israel and deported the 10 tribes to the exile. So he also had a palace and a garden with all the items that we found in Ramat Rachel. Look on the pyramid-shaped stone on the roof. Look at the columns and the Proto-Holy capital that they have there. Look in this other of Ashurbanipal, another great Assyrian king, and his garden and palace with the same items. So we know that it's there. And we know that in all these gardens, they have luxurious plants, trees that they brought from all over, all kinds of luxurious items. And we ask ourselves, what was in the garden of Ramat Rachel? We tried to look into the soil, and we found no clues. We tried many different ways to understand what plants, what trees were in the garden of Ramat Rachel. And then one day, we were sitting with a specialist in pollen. Pollen is the powder of the flowers. And she had an idea. She said, she looked on this plaster of one of the pools, and we saw that every time, every year or every second year, they put another layer of plaster in order that the water will not run away. And she thought, maybe one day they put this plaster in the spring, and all the garden around was blooming. And the wind was, there was a kind of western wind. And all the powder, the pollen of the flowers was in the air, and the plaster was still wet, and the pollen was stick into the wet layer of plaster, and then the plaster became dry, and it kind of trapped the pollen inside it. So what we can do, we can take out this plaster, we can look at the microscope and find all this pollen, and since she knows how to identify different pollen and to know exactly what was the flower, what was the tree, what was the plant before, so she can recognize what was in the garden in Ramat Rachel. So she took the samples and she found out that in the garden of Ramat Rachel we had grapevine, which is natural because we have many of these in Israel all over. And we had figs, which is also something very common in the gardens everywhere in Israel. But then she found a poplar tree, which is very rare in the desert. Poplar tree you have usually in places that you have a lot of water. And the poplar tree was not only in Ramat Rachel, it was also blooming in Ramat Rachel. And then she found out that we have a cedar, which is a tree usually that you have in Lebanon, in the high mountains. It also needs a lot of cold weather, but a lot of water. And again, we had a cedar in Ramat Rachel, and it was blooming in Ramat Rachel. And we have a willow, which is again a tree that needs a lot of water. And it was blooming in Ramat Rachel. And birch, again, and she found a lot of myrtle, which is a very nice bush, but again needs a lot of water, and it's very popular in gardens because you can cut it in different shapes, and it has a good smell. But then she found out that also we have duckweed and water lilies all over. So on the pools in Ramat Rachel in the garden, you have a lot of water lilies, but then, suddenly it hits us, because she found that the first ever Persian walnut, which is a tree that came from Persia. It's not natural in the Middle East. The first ever appearance of walnut was in Ramat Rachel in this garden. The Hebrew name today for walnut is egoz. And you even can find it once in the Bible, in the Song of Songs, about the egoz. And even the word egoz, it's a Persian name for this walnut tree. But then the most important thing was that not only the Persian walnut was there, which is a tree that is very important in Persian religion, because the fruit of it looks like maybe a little baby in the mother, inside the mother, or maybe like a brain, or there are many stories in the Persian ancient literature about the walnut. But then she found out that it's not only this, but also the main thing is the citron. The first ever citron was in Ramat Rachel, and this is a tree that is coming from the Indus Valley. And it's very rare, it's very important, because very soon after, this citron became very essential in Judaism. Every Jew, according to the laws in the Bible, in every beginning of year, every autumn, should build a sukkah, kind of a tent in his house, and had 4 different kinds of trees with him. One of them is citron. It means that no one could celebrate this tabernacle, this event, before the first citron came to Israel. And we know that only a few hundred years later, it became so popular that indeed every Jew in Judah had a citron in his hand every year in the month of tabernacle. So this is the most important thing that we can combine from the garden in Ramat Rachel to Judaism, and understand many of the developments, not only of the gardens, not only about the importance of Ramat Rachel, but how things are coming from the nature or from the ruling empire into Judaism. So this is really an important thing, and this is really something that we were very happy to find in our excavation in Ramat Rachel. Another example that I want to talk with you about that connects us to the understanding or deep understanding of how archaeology can connect us to different aspects of life is this story about the donkeys. Now, donkey in the ancient world is like a car today. You turn in your donkey in the morning and you go to school. You turn in your donkey in the morning, you go to the grocery shop. A camel is more like a truck. You don't, start your camel in the morning to go to school. Truck is when you want to go, all the way to Atlanta. Or, with heavy suitcases and long trip. This is a camel. So a donkey is a very important animal. Now, we know that donkeys were very important because we found donkeys in drawings, on pottery. And we know that the main thing with donkeys was to use them in transportation. People could ride donkeys, or people could have some wagons or something. It was a very simple thing. And even in ancient, Egyptian drawings, you can find the import of donkeys. If you go to the Middle East today, in many tribes in the desert, you can find that they still use the donkey as the main transportation. This is a donkey in Jordan that we took a photo of, that you can ride on, just like, that we have really in Egypt. The other thing to have with donkeys is that you can put some weight on a donkey, something like 50, 60 kilos on each side of the donkey. You can see here how donkeys can carry, again, in ancient Egypt, some weight from the field back home. By the way, this is not the way to use donkeys. And this is also not the way to use donkeys. And, you should know how to use donkeys. But when you know how to use donkeys, it's very useful. Okay? Not this. But again, even if you are going, 50, 60 years ago, so people still use donkeys. This is the local doctor in some of the new, small villages in Israel, going with a donkey with all he needs, for the little kids. This is modern donkey, in one of the modern Druze villages in Israel. So still people are riding the donkey inside it. And the next thing is that donkey is very important in plowing. So you can use donkey to plow the field. In many cases you can see donkeys plowing, and there is only one rule in the Bible about donkeys. And the Bible, I don't know why, I don't know if someone knows why, saying that you cannot plow together with an ox and a donkey. It's a rule. It's in the Bible. Don't use both of them. So Muslims, they don't read the Bible, so they can use a donkey and an ox to plow together. Here is an example. But the most important rule, and the most unique one, and something that I never understood, the donkey is the only animal in the Bible that there is a law in the Pentateuch, in the Bible, that you should kill every firstborn donkey. Should kill him. And the word in Hebrew is very hard. It's to cut his head. For sure it's not for sacrificing, because no one is sacrificing donkeys. For sure it's not for eating, because no one is eating donkeys. So why to kill the firstborn donkey? It's a strange thing, and donkey is the only animal to do it. But if you can read Hebrew, you can see that the only solution not to kill the firstborn donkey is to replace him with a sheep or a goat that you can sacrifice to God. So the only option not to kill the firstborn donkey was to replace it with a sheep or a goat. And I should tell you that one of the weird ceremonies until these days that you can find in ultra-religious Jewish neighborhoods is that they're doing the celebration every year of replacing a donkey, firstborn donkey, with a sheep or a goat. You can see here the rabbis, very, very important rabbis, sitting in a kind of celebration, giving a sheep or a goat, instead of the firstborn donkey. And thousands of Jews, are sitting there and looking on this weird ceremony that no one understands. I will try to give you an explanation for this in a minute. The last thing that we can know about donkey is that because donkey live most of his life on the way, on the road, not in the city, not in the houses, so usually when donkeys died, they died on the roads. And usually you cannot find burial places for donkeys. So it became kind of a symbol that someone who is not buried, his body is just thrown, along the road like a body of a donkey. So, and this is something that we know. For example, Jeremiah is telling to King Jehoiakim in Jerusalem that he will not be buried and his body will be thrown outside like a donkey, like a body of a donkey. And usually when you find bodies of donkeys, again, modern times, these are bodies that, Bedouins or, people are throwing the bodies outside and let them, stay there until they disappear. So in some cases, this is what we find, some remains of bodies of donkeys. And it's very rare to find burials of donkeys inside cities. And now, I'll just give you a short introduction because in our excavation in Tel Azeka, that in a minute I'll let my partner Yuval Godat to show you some or to explain some things about this excavation, we found a unique thing. We found a floor of a house that was built there 4,500 years ago, 2,500 BC, in the early Bronze period, thousands of years before Judaism even began. And under the floor of one of the houses, this floor, in a minute, we found a burial of two very young donkeys. Both of them were around 3 or 4 months old. Both of them, we found them buried under the floor. Someone cut the heads of a very young donkeys. He put the bodies and the heads 180 degrees opposite under the floor, and he buried them under the floor. And then we can see suddenly the first clue to the origin of the biblical law to cut the heads of the firstborn donkey, or these twins in this case. And suddenly we understood, and you can see here the floor, and you can see here the burial of the donkey, and in a minute I'll show you the remains. You see here the remains of a donkey coming up. It was a complete two donkeys complete, with the head turned 180 degrees cut after they cut it. And we start to understand that it was one of the biggest sacrifice that was demanding, probably from the status with people with the status of commerce people or people with a lot of money, and they should give the most important thing for them, to sacrifice it, to kill it, not eat it, not sacrifice it for God, just to kill it and bury it under the floor of the house as a symbol probably for the gods. I can sacrifice the most important thing for myself, and I can sacrifice it, maybe for the good luck, maybe for success, maybe for something. And I think that if you'll think about it, as really the most important thing for these people, like I'm sure that if you'll come to your father, ask him to sacrifice his car, he will think about it before doing it, So I think that this is the message, people with money, people who are dealing with commerce, people who are, you should sacrifice the firstborn donkey as not for sacrificing for God, not for eating it, but as a symbol that you can give up on the most important thing that you have for better future, for better luck, for the success. And this very ancient, that we found for the first time, turned away, and after 2,000 years, we suddenly can find a clue for this thing in the Bible. So we have some other, example for this thing, but since the time running, and I want that you know a little bit about excavation in Azekah, so I'll stop here. I'm sure that when you'll join us one day in our excavation in Tel Azekah, you will find out that archaeology is an exciting thing. It's also addicting. If you'll come once, you'll like to come back. So be careful. But when you think about things, when you think about the finds, when you combine them with ancient history, with the Bible, with ancient life, it's becoming even more exciting. So thank you very much.
Okay. So thank you all, and thank you for that. And in the 10 minutes, 15 minutes that I have left, how much? This is the correct clock? 2 minutes? 2 minutes. I'll tell you in 2 minutes, 15 minutes. We're until 10? Okay. There's no pressure. I'll try to share with you the experience of digging at Azekah. We had people from King's University coming and digging with us in the past. It was a wonderful experience for us to get to know them and for them to get to know the place and so on. And, there are many stories that I can tell about Azekah, its location, but I think its importance in the past connected to the roads. This is the location when you come in the winter. Usually students are coming in the summer, so everything is dried, like now your surroundings, and nobody believes us that it can be so green, but it is, just by the Elav Valley. And the Tell is very, very disconnected to its surrounding. It's just above the valley. It's disconnected from the hills to its south and to its north. You can see a picture taken in the 1940s where the Tell was still not forested, and it was easier to spot it, and we can see the parts that are making up the Tell and the way to get to it. We know about Tel Azekah from biblical and extra-biblical, outside of the Bible sources. The first thing is the story that Sennacherib marched and conquered Azekah. This was the first town of Judah, King Hezekiah's Judah, that he met along his way. Then he went to Lachish and other places. If we read it together, Ashur, this is what he's saying, okay? Ashur, my Lord, encourage me, and against the land of Judah I marched. In the course of my campaign, the tribute of the king of Philistia I received, so there was no war to the west of Azekah. With the might of Ashur, my Lord, the province of Hezekiah of Judah, like like the city of Azekah, his stronghold, which is between the borders of the land of Judah. Like the nest of eagles located in the mountain ridge, like pointed iron daggers without number reaching high into the heaven. And he goes on and on and on, and he describes how it destroys the place. So I don't know if it's really an eagle nest, but maybe somebody coming from the land of Mesopotamia, which is very flat. To see a hill like that is very prominent. Then Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylonia, marches against the place and also destroys it. And we know from Jeremiah about Azekah being one of the last strongholds, and also from a letter that was found at the gate of Lachish, which mentions the fire signals of Azekah. Okay, this is in biblical Hebrew the word of the name of Azekah, and on and on. The most famous mentioning of Azekah in the biblical text is the story of the fight between King David and Goliath, taking place in the valley of Elah, just between Socho and Azekah. And most people that are coming to Azekah are standing on the tel, overlooking the valley, and just simply recreating this very, very famous and important story. It's not surprising that it was one of the first sites to be modernly excavated at the turn of the 19th into the 20th century. A British expedition, hundreds of workers working all over the site, and they, from what they report, they found some fortifications, they found a fort, they found other things. I will not go into these two details too much. Since then, nobody touched Azekah. So for 100 years, it stood waiting for our team, and we began by making an archaeological survey, very different than the methods that were used in the past. And this led us not just collecting shards, we also did some underground inspections in order to understand where to dig, where to go, and what to expect to find. And the picture slowly emerged that there are different places that we can dig, and in each place we'll get a different story. We then recruited a big team, and from all the stories, where is it? The Loveda video? Okay, so this was a nice video. The main thing, we're talking all the time about science, but if you come to the summer at Azekah, this is the main thing. Students from all over the world joining together in an effort for a month and a half, sometimes even 2 months. We work together from very early in the morning until very late at night. We have students from Australia, from Germany, from the United States, from Israel, and from other smaller institutions across the world. Everybody is welcomed. Even our team, over the years, the students that are growing up with us are coming from the world. They are not just, Tel Aviv University students. There are 5 Americans from the United States, a bunch of Australians that are making everybody happy and drinking a lot of beer, somebody from Brazil, a group from Germany, which also, the beer thing is also very important to them, from Malta, from Scotland, and the rest are coming from Israel. So it's a very international team, and working together, we not separate, different groups to different places, and it's an opportunity to get to know people. And we've been working, as I've said, all across the tel, each area with its own story. There is a lot here that we can say, and we know now that the site was inhabited since these early bronze donkey sacrifices and until something like 2,000 years ago. So there are many, many stories. I will try to concentrate on one, and maybe if I have time, a second story. And this is the fortifications of the site, how the site was fortified. We saw from the profile of the tel that there has to be walls around it. Also, our understanding of an ancient site is that it's surrounded by a wall. And we wanted to find what we can see from the wall. We went into the western slope, north to south, and we start making a section after section in order to get to see the wall. When you look at this picture, you say to yourself, oh, these are stones, maybe really it's the wall. But it's not the stones that should attract your attention, it's what is below the stones. And as the camera gets closer, you can see the lines, and these lines are lines of mud bricks. Okay? All of these things were made 4,000 years ago by people making simply mud. okay? It should have dissolved, it should have disappeared. We don't really know how it survived. Maybe it was rebuilt by the stone wall that you see on top of it very fast, and then it was buried, and then there was no reason for it to disappear, okay? And it's all plastered. Even if you look from the top, something that for us, the archaeologists, is easier to recognize, but I'm helping you here. We can see the mud bricks from on top. So this is the fortification wall built 4,000 years ago by the Canaanites living in Azekah and really shaping the site to the way we received it in our times. Okay, and here are some more close-ups that you can believe me that these are mud bricks and they are plastered, so they are protected from water, and this used to protect the wall. Okay. Then we went further along the line and recognized more and more sections of this city wall, which I'm saying now here as an obvious thing that it's dating to the Middle Bronze, but proving a date in the scientific method is very, very difficult. We recognize the mud bricks, we recognize the building techniques. This is another section. We even know now that there are two parallel walls that were built together, but we had no definite date until, you collect one and one and one, and at one point we found this store jar. This is a habit that existed in the Middle Bronze Age, mostly, to take small children that unfortunately died of young age and to place them in a jar. I think the jar is symbolizing the womb of the mother, as if he's returning to the womb. And not just placing the baby, also placing in some offerings that he will have for his afterlife. So next to this baby, there were ceramic vessels that are very typical of the Middle Bronze Age. This burial, ceremonial burial, was done inside the wall. So it tells us either that the wall was built in the Middle Bronze Age, and then because it's an important place, people placed their very important thing, their child in the wall, or that the wall went out of use and it became an area that people were burying. So this gives us a very definite date to the entire structure that really shaped the site, and it's really a one moment. Usually in archaeology, it's very hard to see one moment. You see processes, you see things that are very, very wide, but here it's a moment of a burial and sacrifice. If we follow further the wall, we found also this kind of tower that was built in order to protect whoever is approaching the wall towards a gate that we're supposed to see here there. And you can see these are mighty stones. This is, we're not talking here about the pyramids in Egypt and the ziggurats at Mesopotamia, but for Middle Bronze Age construction in Canaan, this is an incredible structure that survived 4 meters high, standing and protecting anybody approaching the city gate. Okay, and we know of other places where we see the city when it was destroyed. Let me jump to the second story. So that's one story we wanted to share. Another story begins in an area that we wanted to understand the bigger inner part of the city, the Acropolis. We knew where the Acropolis is supposed to be, the upper part where you see the tree. Anybody visiting Azekah, this is the place to go, sit in the shade and appreciate the landscape. And we began by digging there masses of stones that we didn't really know what they are. There are two kind of stories these stones are making up. I will concentrate on one of them. And then as we get closer with the aerial pictures, you'll be able to see that there is a huge structure here dating to the Middle Bronze Age, probably a temple that was built at the Acropolis for the main god of the city. In every Canaanite city, there was more than one temple, okay, devoted to different gods. It's not like churches that are devoted to the same god. It's different gods, and each one of them has his house. And this is the main, probably, god or goddess of Azekah, and you can see the size of the stones and how it pronounces. This structure changed through time, but reached its final destiny at the end of the Late Bronze Age. This brings us close to the end of the second millennium BCE, 1200 BCE. The place here was destroyed by fire that survived to our time, and why we say temple? Because you can see here the two priests, one from Germany and one from Malta, holding a matzeva, a standing stone that probably was part of the temple, okay, representing a god or representing family lineages. We don't really know what the stone exactly represented. We also found still uncleaned metal figurine of a god, probably Baal, that was used within the temple, and other objects that tells us that this is what was there. But the temple was not the only place that was destroyed. Everywhere that we find this layer of 1200 BCE, we find destruction. Pottery on the floor, that if you collect all the shards together, you're getting the full size, the complete vessels, which tells you, people usually don't leave their belongings if they can. So if this is happening, this is a surprise, and nobody came there afterward, all of this destruction. The most dramatic place where we found this destruction is on the upper tail, where we found a house, maybe a construction area, an industrial zone. We don't really know what it is, but the amount of things that were left on the floor was incredible. Okay, and you can follow, this is more or less the plan of this thing. You can see here, with as your eyes is zooming in, you can see, I think I can say hundreds of vessels that were left on the floor. And as we worked, we saw some store jars that were meant to hold liquids and so on. And just below these 3 store jars, as we began to dig, and this was our first season, we piled them, we dug them, you dig them very carefully, and suddenly we saw human bones below. Okay, and what you have here is a young lady, the age of 15, 16, that was crawling to get out of the house while it was burning, and the store jars fell on top of her neck, and this was the end. Okay, so this was done with a physical anthropologist who recognized each of the bones, was able to really reconstruct the last moment of this young girl. 15 in the old world is old, I think, already. As she was lying there and as she was caught by the fire. Okay, and we moved on, and we have personal items that she had with her, scarabs, naming Egyptian figures, amulets, she had necklaces on her. So we know exactly what was her kit, and she wasn't alone. Together with her, 3 other adults were found in the building, each of them in a different sector of the building, which tells us that this is a big surprise. They were not expecting the house to burn down on them, and we are arguing between ourselves whether this is a result of an earthquake or whether this is a result of a war, and if a war, who can be the people that are behind the war. This is, slowly we'll gather on the evidence. We can see the complete vessels that are coming out there and so on. Here is another person that was lying there holding a cow in his hand. And because we are now in the 21st century and archaeology is becoming more and more scientific, it's not enough just to say there are people there. We are trying to take out DNA reconstruction of these people. We're working with a lab that at the end reaches Harvard. There's a lab at Tel Aviv, but they are cooperating with Harvard. We are dealing even with recognizing what these people were eating, their food habits, they were not brushing the teeth so well. Okay? So if you want to help science in the future, don't brush your teeth. Then there will be enough plaque on your teeth that scientists can come, take out and reconstruct at least the chemical signals of what these people were eating, and if it was local food or food that was imported. Okay, so for us this is a CSI moment, and we are bringing all the labs in order to help us understand these people and what they can tell us. This person that you can see here holding this horn in his hand had a kit by him. And this kit is all of these colorful stones, maybe to make colors for weaving, maybe to make colors for pottery, to decorate pottery. We're trying to understand through the composition of the stones what exactly they were trying to make. And these are the vessels that tells you the function of what was done there, and put together with the skeletons, this would be a wonderful story. And again, okay, MA students, important to say, everything it's not left with us 3 directors. Everything is a base for MA, for students coming from all over the world. You see here Sabina from the Heidelberg University, who did her research on the pottery and now moves on for a PhD. And Vanessa, who is coming from San Diego, a neighborhood of this place. And she did her MA there, and she's also moving to do a PhD now with us. So it's a big opportunity, many questions left unresolved, many vessels to still find out what their story is. Punkt. Thank you very, very much.
All right, I hope that inspired some of you to be Indiana Jones or something along those lines. And our final program for this year is the Monday after Thanksgiving, when Diana Butler Bass will be with us in the morning and the evening. Go and have a wonderful day.